Welcome to Engineer Versus. What we're going to be talking about today is credit card debt. So a lot of people run up debt. We're going to be talking about how to get rid of it, how to have some strategies for it, and what we can do about it. So the big thing is to keep a positive attitude, but as we're looking at this, we're going to develop a plan. So let's walk through the plan. First up is control spending. The big thing is you're not what you earn, you are what you spend or what you don't spend. So the idea is that by controlling spending, you're really going to ratchet down a lot of your credit card debt, so you're not racking up more. And then you're going to find out everything that you owe, that total owed, and all the minimum payments and the interest rates. All of that will go into the calculations, finding out just how bad it might be, and don't get depressed about that. That's going to set up with a plan on what you can do to make a schedule to pay it all off. So this is a rough spending schedule. This isn't where you basically have a disciplined budget. This isn't where we're watching every penny. It's not like that. The idea is we need to set up something and make it paid automatically so you don't have to worry about it as you're moving on. All right, the last part is to get help and how to help yourself. So there's some tricks that you might hear about on the internet, those kinds of things. The biggest help that you're going to get is from your family and friends, maybe some credit counselors that you might run into or reach out to, and also how to negotiate some deals, how to look and be your own best advocate. All right, so next up is control spending here on the plan. So what you spend is more important than what you earn. So if you're going to be spending money on things, make sure that it's going to be things that you are going to value. So these are long-term commodities you might hear people talk about. Instead of going out to eat a lot or things like that, maybe you spend less on some of those things. You have to decide. So again, it's about spending less, not making more. The big thing here is track your spending for a day to a week, and you really start to get an idea, or even go back and look at what you spent over the last week, and figure out what was really frivolous and what was really necessary. Sure, emergencies come up, but how could you avoid that emergency? Maybe you needed to go to the doctor, those kinds of things. Don't judge yourself on those. You absolutely need those things. You need lunch, dinner, etc. You need to still buy things, but decide where to put the limits or even eliminate some of those extras. So you hear people talk about, well, how much you spend on that coffee at Starbucks or wherever you get your coffee from. That might be an extra that you could sort of ratchet down or see what you can change and improve upon. Maybe it is something that you really enjoy once a day and that still stays, but maybe you decide to take out something else. Another thing, don't use your cards. Stop it. Stop using them. Take them, put them away, put them in a drawer, cut up all of them. But if you do need to use one card, pick one and stick with it. I would say stick with like a checking card, one that's linked to your checking account. That way you won't ratchet up any more debt on a card that already has a lot of debt on it. Because if you can't pay off that debt every month, it's actually costing you way more than you're actually putting on there. So if you're spending $10 on that card, you're actually spending, $10, $11 if it's a 10% interest over the cost of a year. So if you got to use a card, pick one that you're going to pay off every month and then stick with that plan, pay it off. Also, I'll reiterate, not everything is emergency you need to have. So you got to think about what you really need, and do you really need to step up for everybody else? What if somebody didn't do this or didn't do that? What if you need an emergency gift or emergency this or that? Sometimes you don't need to do it. Sometimes you need to watch your own budget and make sure that you're okay. Now, if you have a car that has a flat tire, if you have, again, a hospital emergency, those are the emergencies that you got to pay attention to that you can't ignore. So don't judge yourself on those things too harshly either. All right. Next on the plan is still under control spending and items to lessen. Again, we mentioned skipping some nights out, but looking at all those little things. And this is where if you write out that budget, you're going to find out what you need to eliminate. How much are you spending on dinners every night? How much on babysitters? How much on this or that? Maybe your car payment's too much. Maybe there's something that you can do about that too. But it's about living on a little less, a little at a time. The other thing that you can do is start to set limits on birthdays, holidays, gifts, all the extras. Maybe there's a party, happy hour, something like that. Limit yourself on those things. You don't need to buy the keg or buy the most expensive bottle of wine every time somebody throws a party. You don't need to show up with flowers every time. You don't necessarily need to show up and shower people with gifts. That might be a nicety, but maybe you dial it down or ratchet it down. Make sure that you're paying attention to that, and hopefully, if you look at that spending over a week, you can start to notice some of those things to lessen. So cut out the other things that are linked to the cards, things that you might not think about, such as utilities. If you're paying your electric bill or gas or whatever it may be, is linked to an automatic payment on a credit card, take it off. Put it to your checking account. Um, any subscriptions that you might have. Think about some of the subscriptions for not just necessarily magazines, but say like game accounts or something like that. That is something that you probably want to take it off of your cards that you want to start to dial down on. And again, auto pay through your bank. Set up an automatic pay, and it'll be the easiest thing that you've done. And then set vacation limits too. You probably have vacations coming up. Plan ahead. Use rewards to fund flights and hotels if you can. Like those cards oftentimes have like points or something like that linked to them. And maybe that's what sort of got you into the credit card debt to begin with, is racking up those points. Well, uh, probably shouldn't be using them for that anymore. But see what you can cash in and make them work for you. That doesn't mean keep spending on them. It means start to cash in on those rewards as fast as you can. But plan ahead. Figure out where you're going to go, where you're going to stay. If you're going to stay in a hotel or something like that, stay a little further out from the main attractions. You don't need to stay on the campus or on the main attraction unless maybe you're working it out with friends. But the idea is eat and stay a little further away, and you will save a lot more, especially when you get near big cities. And then track what you spent in order to avoid those unknown splurges. Whenever you go on vacation, sometimes there's that temptation of like, hey, let's just go and do this and go ride that and go experience this or go on that tour. Let's take the helicopter tour or something like that. Well, maybe not this time. Maybe you get out of the debt a little bit and then do the helicopter tour next time if it comes up. But it also helps avoid those little splurges, the extra splurges for ice cream or something like that that you might not really think about, but suddenly, you buy ice cream for a family and it's 20, 30, $40 for the family to have ice cream, an ice cream treat. And you just spent, 40, $50, maybe even more on dinner. So try to avoid those splurges and some of those unknowns. So setting those vacation limits can be very important to eliminating some of that debt from racking up again. All right, what do you owe? Here's where we track everything. We find out what the total debt is. Take the time to find it all and write it down. This should be something that you can call up each credit card and within 15 minutes be able to, even with the hold times, be able to find out what your balance is, write it down, ask them specifically what the amount is on your balance currently. Sometimes you might get a little bit of, well, your last statement said that you owed this. Well, no, write down what you owe currently. It may be a couple $100s off, and that can throw things off a little bit. Not horribly, but you never know. Sometimes maybe you put an airplane or something like that, and maybe it's $1,500, and maybe it hasn't registered with them yet. Make sure that you get that all written down. The other thing is, don't be frightened. Not knowing what's out there and what you owe is not managing how much debt you have. Okay, so what you don't know, you can't manage. All right. The other big thing is, don't be depressed. It's not that bad. Really, it's not. Paying it off is going to be easier than you might originally think. And I'll go through a couple scenarios here. So the minimum payments and interest rates, you're going to want to collect all those because this will help you set up a payment plan or let you come up with your own strategy. And then include all your credit card bills. Like if there's anything, like I mentioned before, that's attached to your credit cards, add it into the total debt. So if you're going to be paying, say, a certain amount per month or quarterly even, add that to a yearly bill. Include one full year of payments for something. to that bill. I would say any like clubhouse, like a Costco membership or something like that, that automatically goes to say an American Express card. If you know that that's going to happen, and it's going to happen once a year, or maybe it's quarterly, whatever it happens to be, include that in that total debt. You got to, because it's going to throw you off just a little bit here and there, and that can throw you off. That can lead you to be like, oh, we're getting nitpicked, nickel and dimed. Um, don't let that happen. The other thing is consider paying those things another way. So again, if you can link it to your bank account, you might be able to pull things off a little bit better on your bank account instead of with a credit card. So let's walk through an example here. So here we have 4 credit cards and 2 utilities. That's the left column there. And you can see the total that's on each column in each one of those credit cards and utility. The utility is basically how much the payment is per month. So the minimum per month there at the top for each one of those credit cards, that's the minimum amount owed, basically. And again, I'm working with some rough numbers here. Don't get yourself too involved into the nitpicky nickels and dimes and quarters. The idea is you want to come up with the hundreds and thousands for these columns. You really want to know what you're going to be paying on that minimum per month, and then what the total is, and then also what the interest rates are. And the thing is, you might have an interest rate that's there, and you can see we've got 12%, 14, and then 22%. Oh, that's horrible. But then here we have $22,000 on one that has 0%, but it's for 8 months. And after those 8 months, it goes to 20%. So, wow. Okay, maybe you move some stuff over to that credit card, but now you've got to really consider in 8 months how much of that 22,000 can I pay off? Or maybe you make another move at that point. The utilities are the amount per month, and we're just including those that are going to be moved over that are currently, say, paid by a credit card. And say, one is $120 a month, the other is $200 a month. So say you have like a cable bill and say electricity, something like that. So that's 1 year for each one of those utilities. So you can see that that's going to total up to be $45,000, almost 46, 45,840. The minimum payment per month of $1,120, over $1,000, $1,100 minimum payment per month for all of these going together. So if you were to pay just that minimum payment without the interest involved, it would take you 41 months. Yeah, over 3.5 years, right? Or almost 3.5, well, under 3.5 years. So the idea is that that's the minimum payment without interest. Now the kicker here is the interest is what's going to kill you. Always, always. So if you can, pay off what you can pay off as fast as you can pay it off. So let's make a schedule. And again, this goes back to budget. Don't set a tough budget that you can't keep. If right now you are basically relying on those credit cards to keep you afloat, you're running in the negative. You really got to figure out how to drastically cut your spending and in order to rein everything in and start paying off your credit as well as living on the means that you have. But it's like a diet. Your budget, if you make it too tough, if you start to say, oh, we can only spend $40 for this and $20 for that, it's going to be too hard to follow. So sometimes you might spend a little bit more on clothing. You need a new pair of shoes, or you need a dress shirt for an interview, or a tie, or something like that. Those are things that you're going to need to maybe budget against and say, well, if I do that, then we really shouldn't go out on Friday night for dinner or have drinks for happy hour on Thursday with the guys. Ratchet that back. So again, it's living on that smaller amount, living on less. And a rough budget, though, is going to help you decide what you want to spend on as much as a micromanaged budget. So micromanaged budget, you might say, well, we've got this or that, but a rough budget lets you know that you can sort of adjust things based on a given day or a given week. And you know how your spending goes is sort of up or down, and that's where you got to keep it tracked in order to figure out what you did spend over a given week. And again, not everything is emergency. You don't need to have everything all the time. If somebody's leaving your company and you want to be friends with them, that's great. Well, you don't need to stay at the happy hour and buy a couple rounds for anyone. That's maybe against your kind of your goals here. All right. and then make the payments automatic. So set your funds up so that you can forget about anything, have it come out of your bank account and watch your bank account if you're going to watch something. The reason for doing this is that you're avoiding forgetting, missing a payment. You know when your credit card statements are due, set it up to be automatic, at least the minimum, and then ratchet up from the minimum, round it up to the nearest $10. So you're not only hitting all the deadlines, you're making all your deadlines, and it's automatic. You're rounding that payment up by a little bit, say a couple, $3, maybe $7. The idea is that you're paying a little bit off extra, and any little bit off extra is going to be super helpful for your paying off your credit cards. Meanwhile, you probably won't miss that extra 2, 3, 5, 7, even $9. You're not going to miss that out of your bank account too much. You can pretty much get around it. And then set reminders to check that monthly. Check your bank account, check in on it, see how you're doing. Hey, maybe you had some extra expenditures, and maybe those are showing up in your bank account first as opposed to your credit cards. Let's look at that example again. So this time we're going to budget more payments for our cards. And remember that minimum payment was $11.20. Well, that initial budget for cards, say if we had an initial budget of $1,200, say we're paying about $80 extra. Now that's only $80 extra for paying down, and that can have some nice effects. But if we revised our budget and we started to get an extra $200, now we've got $280 for extra payments for paying down debt. And that can be very rewarding in the long run. So first off, no spending on the high interest cards. Rewards aren't likely worth the cost. No matter when you're going to get those rewards or what those rewards are, sure, it might give you a free hotel room, but again, it's got to go to your credit card, right? Well, if you're not paying off that credit card for a year or two, that's heavy, heavy spending for what you're getting. Another thing is you're going to get bonuses and raises probably over the hopefully, next year or two. Or maybe you got a different job and you're moving up. But all those extras, put half of it to debt and then half to reward yourself. And people have different opinions about this too. But the idea is if you get a new job and you're making a little bit more, keep your same schedule, but then add about half of what your increase might be, your pay increase, to paying down that debt, and then the other half to reward yourself. Don't get down on yourself just because you have this credit card debt. Realize that you're going to still need to make a little bit of extra payment, and yeah, you still are going to have a good time. So realize that, and don't be too tough on yourself in those regards. For our example, and after 1 year, our first total we had was 45,840 as far as our total debt. So for our remaining with our initial budget of that 1200, we had 38,520. Now, if we upped it by another $200, well, that revised budget means that we're paying an extra 2,400 on it, so it lowers it by that much. What I'm not including is the amount of interest that you've saved. So the amount of interest is going to be even more depending on what your interest rates are. So if you have, say, 10% interest, you not only saved, 2,400, you saved an extra $240. So think of it that way. So here's some of that same on the left. We have 4 credit cards, and then we have 2 utilities, and you can see how that's all added up over on the left. Now, if we decide to pay off that credit card, that first one with $6,000 on it, and we paid down that extra, all of that extra, that $2,400 went straight to that credit card number 3 with 22% interest. Now, again, what I didn't include is how much interest you're going to actually be paying on that. But the idea is, look at how dramatically that is reduced. The other thing I didn't put down is how much the minimum payments have reduced your other credit cards as well. So your other 3 credit cards are going to be reduced as well. So the idea is, it's ballpark, is by the time you add how much it's reduced plus the amount of interest, it might negate itself. You really got to do these calculations for yourself. I'm not going to give it on this example because it is kind of complicated, and I want you to go through and figure all that out on your own. And that's where you're also sort of deduce which credit card do I need to pay off first? Which one do I want to go after? So that's part of the idea. Whenever you're choosing what you want to do and how much you want to do with it. All right, more on this. The additional years, the outlying years. So the months with the initial budget of 1,200, we're going to take 56 months to pay that off. It's 4.7 years. The revised budget, 44 months, 3.7 years. You can see we reduced it by 1 year by weaseling out somehow in a given month an extra $200. Now you might say, $200 in a month, that's rough, man. It's hard to get. Well, that's up to you, and you can do it somehow, some way. Hopefully, you don't have this kind of credit card debt, though, either, and it will be a lot easier for you. Oops, I meant to go on this chart, and basically, if you're looking at that with the year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, you can see at year 4 there, it's in the negative, and that means you can start investing 5,000. In year 5, you finally got everything paid off if you went with the initial budget. Now, the thing that I'm not doing here is I'm not changing this. What you can do year over year is start ratcheting things up, especially if you got that raise, you got that bonus, you got that new job. That can really work well for you, especially if you add on to everything that you've been doing. It really starts to help pay things down that much faster. All right. Get help is the last step here. So whenever you have your debt versus your income, is it too much to overcome? And I mentioned this previously about, hey, maybe you're just living paycheck to paycheck, credit card payments, or just paying off other credit card payments. That might be you. What can you do about it? What can you avoid as far as extra payments and so on? You really might need to make some harsh choices, or you might be thinking about bankruptcy. But I'll tell you what, bankruptcy is going to be harsh also. Given the housing crisis, quote unquote crisis, bankruptcy is becoming a little bit more tough on people to do and to get away with. I shouldn't say get away, but the idea is that bankruptcy is going to look at everything that you've spent in way more depth, and what they're going to do is look at all of your assets that you have now, cars, house, any sort of jewelry, game systems, computers, all of these sorts of things they will look at as assets to be liquidated in order to pay the debts. So it can be pretty harsh. And not only that, your credit is ruined. People will say, oh, it's only ruined for 7 years. That's major. Try getting a debt or try getting a car after that, and declaring bankruptcy is going to hurt you in a lot of ways that you do not want to have. And not only that, people will say, oh, after 7 years, you're in the clear. Well, first off, you have to live for 7 years with that. It's not like a broken mirror, though. It doesn't necessarily go away. People will always know that you declared bankruptcy sometime in your past. Couldn't get out from underneath some debt, and you had some poor choices that you made, so people are never, ever going to be giving you the interest rates that you maybe deserve. So be careful with bankruptcy. All right. Friends and family can be there for you in a lot of ways. Make them there for you financially. Make a deal with them. Ask them for $1,000 to help pay for things, and then make a deal for 0 interest and pay them back, and then automate that straight out of your bank account and say, you know what? If you loan me $1,000, I will pay you $20 a month, and until it's all paid back. And you might say, well, that's a long time. It can be many, many months. But if you work out a deal with them and you get out of credit card debt, you can pay them back at that 0 interest rate a lot better and have a firmer family friendship if you can do that. But make sure to pay them back. That's why I have an exclamation point there. If you do not pay them back, guess what they're not going to do? They're not going to give you any more money. So if you work it out and you say, well, you gave me this $1,000, you know what? I could really use $2 more thousand. I'm really making progress. But maybe, after a year or two, you can really get rid of a lot of your debt with a few extra $1,000 from family and your really close friends. That might be something that's definitely worthwhile. But again, make sure that you're paying them back. And if you pay them back and all your credit card debt is gone, consider them as another loan. So make sure that you pay them back in full, and make sure that you recognize that, and maybe give them a little bonus at the end. Just an idea. Other ways to help yourself are with looking into banks and credit counselors and such. So banks don't like the risks, and their interests may be higher. So you might look forward to maybe consolidating everything, but their interest rate might still be at, say, 8, 9, 10%, depending on what your credit is and how much debt to how much income you have. So they may not like the risks either. But if you put something on the line as collateral, like a car or a house, they might be up for it, right? But the idea is, you probably, if you own a house, you probably have thought about, pulling out some of the credit for that, or a car, those kinds of things. And if something happens, you're going to lose those assets. Okay? So you got to really be careful with that. So counselors do all of the above, like what we're talking about, looking into everything like a bank does, but they might do it for a little bit of money, and they'll look at everything for you. They'll set up a payment plan for you. They'll do everything for you. Instead, you can do all these things yourself for free. So this is a form of free consulting, and there's other free consulting available. Take advantage of it, use it, and make sure that you're doing the best for your own interests, and making sure that you're paying things off at your rate, not necessarily what a counselor might want you to do. And then last, here we have help yourself. Negotiate with those credit card companies. So call them up and tell them that you're serious, and prove it by closing the account to any new charges. This means that whenever you close that account, you cannot put new charges to it, and you put it in a drawer, or you cut it in half, or whatever, and then you do not charge to it anymore. Ask for lower rates. Tell them you're going to go someplace else, and then call them up every month and ask them, to reduce or eliminate some of the fees or some of the interest rates. Also, if you have penalties, if you've made a late payment, call them up and tell them, yeah, I made a late, I was late, but I did pay, I made up for it. I'm good, I want to make sure that everything's okay. Could you please remove that penalty? They are willing to do it. And the idea is, especially if you haven't had couple, more than one or two penalties in a given year, they will more than willingly go through and say, all right, we'll give you, we'll take off this 25 or 20 or $30, whatever it may be, as far as a penalty. Also ask them to waive the fees, and if they don't, it's time to get rid of the card. Tell them that you do not want the card anymore, and that as soon as another card comes up, another opportunity comes up, you're going to be getting rid of it. And a lot of them will be like, we don't care. We deal in such volume. You do not matter. Well, that's not the credit card company for you anyway. So you call them up the next month and ask them again about the same thing, about their interest rates, see if they can lower them, and again ask them about getting rid of the fees. So that's just one way of trying to get a little bit of extra money into your pocket, or I should say, away from your credit card. And then move the debt. You can get credit card companies that will offer debt consolidation deals, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, about a 0%, maybe for 8 months or something. But review the deal for some fees or limits. Maybe there's a time limit. Maybe there's something that goes along with it. That, all the back interest, if you don't pay it within a certain amount of time, all that back interest is also added. That's not a good deal. It might be for a lower amount, and you can pay it off within the time limit. But if you don't pay it off within that, say 8 to 12 months, they might decide to charge you interest on the whole duration, the whole period. That's not necessarily the card that you want either, because guess what? 8, 12 months from now, are you going to remember? Well, you can set up a reminder, but chances are you're probably not going to remember that, and you might end up paying all that interest anyway. And then go ahead and make the deal and make the payout before the deal ends. It can be nice, but it can be work to do that, to move the debt around. So it can be kind of aggravating, especially if you're looking around and nobody is offering you anything. Don't be surprised if they don't, because you do have that outstanding debt. All right, this has been Engineer versus Credit Card Debt. Thanks for sticking with me.